There is a quiet comfort in being right, or at least in feeling right. You already know the difference. You notice how often you arrange the world to agree with you. You replay the same memories. You return to the same voices. You lean toward information that reassures you that your version of events was justified, necessary, inevitable. Not consciously, not maliciously, instinctively. And over time, without drama, you build a reality that feels stable, orderly, familiar, even as something underneath it starts to thin. You felt the cost of this already. In relationships, you stayed in too long because you remembered the beginning more clearly than the present. In work that stopped evolving because one early win was treated like a permanent verdict on who you are. In the quiet weight of regret that appears only when reality refuses to keep cooperating. This isn't about fixing you. Nothing here assumes you're broken. It's about seeing one mental habit without flinching. One almost everyone carries. One few ever look at directly. What follows isn't advice. It isn't motivation. It isn't a strategy. It's perspective. A way of noticing how your mind protects itself and what that protection has quietly cost you. You already know this pattern. You don't need it named yet. You feel it when something challenges what you've already decided. That tightening, that subtle resistance, not anger, not fear, something quieter. It isn't arrogance. You're not trying to dominate anyone, it's protection. You built a version of the world that holds together, a version where your choices made sense, where your judgments weren't reckless, where the way you became you had internal logic. And once that structure exists, you guard it without noticing. Anything that supports it feels calm, familiar, almost relieving. Anything that threatens it feels off, unnecessary, wrong in tone, even before it's wrong in substance. So you soften certain facts. You give them polite explanations. You call them exceptions. You dismiss feedback that lands too close to the bone. You trust voices that sound like your own. Not because they're correct, because they don't force you to rearrange yourself. Certainty feels like ground under your feet. You don't cling to it because you're weak. You cling to it because you've already survived enough instability. But there's a quiet cost. You feel it in moments when something doesn't fully add up anymore. When a story you've told yourself starts requiring effort to maintain. You don't argue with it. You don't collapse over it. You simply look away, and the world keeps moving. You've heard yourself say it, not out loud, sometimes not even consciously. He didn't mean it. She's just under pressure. You say it calmly, reasonably, as if you're being generous. But what you're really doing is protecting a version of the relationship that once felt safe to stand inside. So every moment that contradicts it gets labeled temporary, an anomaly, a bad day. And every moment that supports it gets stored like evidence, not to convince anyone else, to reassure yourself. You already know how this ends. You do the same thing with yourself, earlier than you remember. At some point you decided who you were, not dramatically. Quietly. I'm not creative. I'm not built for that. I'm the dependable one. It felt like self-awareness. It felt mature. So you started noticing only the moments that confirmed it. The times you struggled. The times you hesitated. The times it didn't come easily. Opportunities passed without argument. You didn't reject them. You simply didn't see them. That wasn't limitation. That was loyalty to a story. At work, it showed up differently. Cleaner, more respectable. Something worked once. You remember the feeling. So it became truth. Then principle, then identity. Early success hardened into certainty. Changing conditions felt like noise. New information felt unnecessary. You weren't careless, you were consistent. And consistency, when unexamined, becomes a cage that looks like confidence. Regret is where this habit sharpens. You revisit old decisions, not to understand them, to justify them. You rearrange the past until it makes emotional sense again. You smooth the edges. You explain away the alternatives. Because admitting you were wrong isn't painful. Admitting you protected the wrong thing is. So you carry the illusion forward. It weighs less in the moment, but it never really leaves your hands. You already sense this, even if you've never named it. Your mind isn't chasing truth. It's guarding continuity. It wants you to remain you, intact, coherent. That's why certain ideas feel heavier than others. Not because they're truer, because they're load-bearing. Some beliefs aren't opinions. They're structural beams. You didn't just think them, you built around them. So when one starts to crack, the reaction isn't intellectual, it's visceral. Your body recognizes the threat before your language does. Letting go wouldn't just change your mind, it would rearrange the room you've been standing in for years. That's why you hold on longer than you should, not out of stubbornness, out of loyalty. The mind isn't malicious when it does this. It's efficient. It prefers a stable story to an accurate one. Consistency feels like safety, even when it quietly limits your range. The danger isn't believing things. Belief is unavoidable. The danger is mistaking familiarity for clarity, because the moment you stop questioning your conclusions, nothing collapses, nothing breaks, nothing announces itself. Learning doesn't end dramatically, it fades, and the silence that follows feels like peace, until you realize it's just the absence of movement. There's a question that already circles your mind when something feels settled too quickly. You don't always let it surface, but it's there. What would actually make this collapse? What would have to be true for this belief to stop standing? Sometimes nothing answers back. Not because the belief is strong, because it's armored, and armor isn't confidence. You also know that moment when certainty arrives too smoothly, too clean, no friction, no resistance, just that quiet, internal nod. That's when you don't react. You don't argue with it. You don't announce doubt. You pause, because certainty rarely announces truth. It announces recognition, the comfort of seeing the same shape again. And familiarity, left unchecked, decides more than you think. Then there's the thought you almost never follow all the way through. The one you touch and withdraw from. If this were wrong, how would you miss it? Not dramatically, not obviously, quietly, through omission, through what you stopped noticing because it no longer fit. This question doesn't attack anything, it creates distance, and distance is power. Over time, something shifts in you, not dramatically, not in ways anyone else can easily point to. Your decisions don't become flawless, they become lighter. You stop welding yourself to them. You move forward without sealing every door behind you. You leave room, and room changes everything. You notice regret behaves differently now. It doesn't ambush you years later. It doesn't arrive fully formed. It signals early, quietly, and because you aren't defending every choice like it's a reflection of your worth, you adjust sooner, without explanation, without ceremony. That alone spares you more than you admit. Your confidence changes shape. It stops performing. You don't rush to be right. You don't compete for certainty. You don't need agreement to feel grounded. You can let silence stretch. You can let correction pass without reacting. You can let other people think whatever they need to think. That's not hesitation. You don't need to abandon what you believe. You've earned most of it. You don't need to live in doubt. That would be noisy, reactive. What you've learned to do instead is subtler. You hold your conclusions without clenching. You let them exist without needing to defend them. You don't collapse when they're questioned, because your identity isn't welded to being right anymore. You've noticed this already. Arguments lost their appeal, not because you softened, because you stopped needing the friction. You don't win debates with yourself now. You don't rehearse explanations. You don't correct every misunderstanding. You wait, and reality speaks on its own timeline. Sometimes it speaks loudly, sometimes it barely whispers. Either way, you don't rush to interrupt it. You listen without tightening, without posturing, without retreating into justification. That restraint changes everything. Life feels less rigid now, less performative, less desperate to make sense immediately, not easier, clearer. And clarity doesn't announce itself, it settles. That isn't certainty, that's understanding.
Thanks for spending time in this. If this sparked a new way of thinking, hit like and subscribe to keep the ideas flowing. And don't forget, check the description for the links to the resources and the original books we used today. We'll see you in the next one.